Ferrari has been warned to start listening to Lewis as Charles decides to look for Plan B. Max throws in the towel for this championship, and all the latest F1 news. What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton's disappointing first season at Ferrari might actually be setting up one of the most incredible comeback stories in Formula One history? While everyone's writing off the seven-time world champion, there's a former Ferrari insider who believes we're witnessing the early stages of something truly special. Right now, Hamilton sits 66 points behind his teammate Charles Leclerc in the championship standings. He hasn't added a single podium to his record-breaking collection of 202. Meanwhile, Leclerc has stepped onto the podium 7 times this season. The numbers paint a pretty clear picture, and it's not flattering for Hamilton. But here's where things get interesting. Francesco Scuderia knows what winning looks like at Ferrari. He was there during the Golden Era, working as a mechanic when Michael Schumacher transformed the Italian team into an unstoppable force. Between 1999 and 2005, Ferrari dominated Formula One like no team had before, securing 6 consecutive Constructors' Championships while Schumacher claimed 5 drivers' titles in a row. Now Scuderia is making a bold prediction that's turning heads throughout the paddock. He believes Hamilton can become Ferrari's Michael Schumacher too, but only if the team makes one crucial change in their approach. Let's take a step back and understand what made the Schumacher era so special. It wasn't just about having a fast car or a talented driver. According to Scuderia, the secret ingredient was something far more valuable than speed. It was trust. Complete, unwavering trust between driver and team, built on the understanding that everyone was working toward a common goal. During those championship years, every person at Ferrari took responsibility for their role. When they won, they celebrated together. When they lost, they accepted defeat as a unit. Schumacher wasn't just the driver. He was the leader who shaped the team's technical direction and development philosophy. This is where Hamilton's current situation becomes fascinating. Despite being outperformed by Leclerc on track, Scuderia argues that Hamilton brings something to Ferrari that goes beyond raw lap time. He brings the organizational knowledge and structured approach that's characteristic of British teams, qualities that are fundamentally different from Ferrari's traditional Italian methodology. Think about Hamilton's background. He spent over a decade at Mercedes, where he was part of one of the most dominant eras in Formula One history. He didn't just drive those championship-winning cars, he helped develop them. He understands what it takes to build a winning machine from the ground up. But here's the problem Ferrari faces, and it's what Scuderia calls a potential vicious circle. If the team continues to prioritize Leclerc's feedback simply because he's faster right now, they risk alienating Hamilton and losing access to his invaluable experience. When a driver doesn't feel like they're part of the technical management process, they can't contribute to long-term development effectively. Scuderia's solution is counterintuitive but brilliant. He suggests Ferrari should trust Hamilton beyond what the current results indicate. Yes, Leclerc is incredibly fast and has adapted better to driving what Scuderia describes as a car that requires you to walk on eggshells. But Hamilton is different. He's strong, experienced, and needs a more solid, predictable car to extract maximum performance. Here's the key insight. If Ferrari listens to Hamilton and develops the car according to his feedback, they won't just help Hamilton perform better. They'll create a more stable, consistent platform that will ultimately benefit Leclerc as well. It's not about choosing sides. It's about building a better foundation for both drivers. The parallels to the Schumacher era are striking. When Schumacher joined Ferrari in 1996, he didn't immediately start winning championships. It took time to build the right team structure and develop the right car philosophy. Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, and Schumacher worked together patiently, understanding that sustainable success requires long-term thinking. Scuderia emphasizes this point repeatedly. Building a championship-winning team takes time and patience. The results don't come immediately, but when they do arrive, they tend to be spectacular and sustained. So what does this mean for Hamilton's legacy at Ferrari? At 39 years old, he's running out of opportunities to prove his peak hasn't passed. He was outscored by George Russell in 2 of their 3 seasons together at Mercedes, and now Leclerc is winning their internal battle. The pressure is mounting, and critics are questioning whether Hamilton still has what it takes. But maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Maybe Hamilton's struggles this season aren't a sign of decline, but rather growing pains as he adapts to a completely different team culture and car philosophy. Maybe his true contribution to Ferrari won't be measured in race wins this year, but in the foundation he helps build for future success. Consider what Hamilton brings to the table beyond pure driving talent. He's won championships with 2 different teams under multiple regulation changes. He's experienced the highest highs and lowest lows of Formula One. He understands the psychological aspects of championship battles, the importance of team unity, and the technical nuances that separate good cars from great ones. If Ferrari can swallow their pride and fully embrace Hamilton's input, they might discover something remarkable. They might find that his experience in building championship-winning teams is exactly what they need to break their current cycle of near misses and disappointments. The 2026 regulation changes present a perfect opportunity for this philosophy to be tested. These new rules will essentially reset the competitive order, giving every team a chance to start fresh. If Ferrari designs their 2026 car with Hamilton's development input as a cornerstone, they could emerge from the regulation chain as genuine championship contenders. And here's where Leclerc fits into this vision. The young Monegasque has already proven himself as one of the most talented drivers on the current grid. He's been consistently competitive even with an imperfect car. Imagine what he could achieve with a machine designed using Hamilton's championship-winning experience and knowledge. This isn't about replacing Leclerc or diminishing his role. It's about creating a team structure where both drivers can thrive, with Hamilton serving as the technical leader and developmental guide, while Leclerc maximizes the performance on track. The beauty of this approach is that it creates a win-win scenario for everyone involved. Hamilton gets to make a meaningful final contribution to the sport, potentially helping Ferrari return to championship contention. Leclerc benefits from driving a car developed with championship-winning expertise, and Ferrari gets to combine the best of both worlds, raw talent and experienced wisdom. Of course, this requires Ferrari to make a fundamental shift in their approach. They need to look beyond current lap times and focus on long-term potential. They need to trust in Hamilton's experience even when the immediate results don't justify that faith. The question isn't whether Hamilton can still drive at the highest level. The question is whether Ferrari has the courage and vision to fully utilize his expertise in building a championship-winning team. If they do, we might look back at this difficult 2025 season as the foundation for something truly special. As we move toward the end of this season and look ahead to the regulation changes coming in 2026, Ferrari stands at a crossroads. They can continue down their current path, potentially wasting Hamilton's final years and missing out on his invaluable experience. Or they can take Scuderini's advice, fully embrace Hamilton as their technical leader, and potentially recreate the magic of the Schumacher era. The choice they make could determine not just Hamilton's legacy at Ferrari, but the team's competitive future for years to come. Sometimes the most important victories happen off the track, in meeting rooms and development sessions, long before the checkered flag waves. Picture this scenario. It's March 2026, and Fernando Alonso crosses the finish line at the season opener, taking his first victory since 2013. The crowd erupts, but more importantly, it signals the beginning of what could be the most dramatic championship comeback story in Formula One history. And according to former McLaren driver Juan Pablo Montoya, this isn't just wishful thinking. It's practically guaranteed to happen within the next 3 years. The reason for this bold prediction: two words that are sending shockwaves through the Formula One paddock: Adrian Newey and regulatory loopholes. But before we dive into why this combination could reshape the entire sport, let me ask you something that might surprise you. Did you know that every single time Honda has committed to a works engine partnership in Formula One, they've eventually won championships? And did you know that Adrian Newey has never failed to deliver title-winning machinery when given the proper resources and time? These aren't just coincidences. They're patterns that suggest something extraordinary is about to unfold at Aston Martin. But here's what makes this situation even more intriguing. We're not just talking about any ordinary regulation change. The 2026 Formula One season will introduce the most radical technical overhaul the sport has seen in decades. And if there's one person in the world who knows how to exploit new regulations better than anyone else, it's Adrian Newey. Let's start with what makes Newey so special in situations like this. Throughout his career, spanning victories with Williams, McLaren, and Red Bull, Newey has demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to find advantages that others miss. When regulations change dramatically, most teams focus on the obvious elements, the things the FIA explicitly wants to achieve. But Newey thinks differently. He looks for the spaces between the rules, the unintended consequences, the areas where interpretation can lead to massive performance gains. The 2026 regulations are creating exactly the kind of environment where Newey thrives. Formula One cars will become significantly smaller and 30 kilograms lighter. The aerodynamic philosophy will shift completely with the introduction of active aerodynamics on both front and rear wings, while the traditional DRS system disappears entirely. Even the tires are changing, becoming 25 millimeters narrower at the front and 30 millimeters narrower at the rear. But perhaps most importantly, the power units are undergoing their most significant transformation since the hybrid era began. The maximum electrical energy deployment will be tripled, making energy management a crucial performance differentiator. Meanwhile, the internal combustion engines will run exclusively on fully sustainable biofuel. This creates multiple layers of complexity that could favor teams with superior technical understanding and innovative approaches. Here's where the Honda partnership becomes crucial to understanding why Montoya is so confident. Honda's track record in Formula One is remarkable when they commit fully to a project. During their partnerships with McLaren in the late 80s and early 90s, they dominated. When they returned as Red Bull's engine supplier more recently, they helped deliver championships. The pattern suggests that Honda doesn't just participate in Formula One, they engineer solutions that win. Now imagine combining Honda's engineering excellence with Newey's design genius and Aston Martin's growing resources. The team has been rapidly expanding, building new facilities, and attracting top talent from across the paddock. Newey joined as both managing technical partner and team shareholder, giving him unprecedented influence over the car's development and the team's technical direction. But there's something else that makes this situation unique. Newey has admitted that since joining Aston Martin, he's entered what his wife calls a design trance. He describes being completely focused on the task at hand, with all his mental energy concentrated on crafting the 2026 Challenger. This level of intensity and focus is exactly what you'd expect from someone who understands the magnitude of the opportunity ahead. The timing couldn't be more perfect for Fernando Alonso either. At 43, many assumed his championship hopes were behind him. His last title came in 2006, and despite being consistently rated as one of the sport's most talented drivers, he's been trapped in uncompetitive machinery for much of his career. But regulation changes have historically created opportunities for experienced drivers who understand how to maximize whatever advantages their teams can find. Alonso's racecraft and ability to extract performance from difficult cars is legendary. If Newey delivers a competitive challenger, Alonso has the skills to capitalize on every tenth of a second available. His experience in wheel-to-wheel combat, his understanding of race strategy, and his ability to perform under pressure make him the ideal candidate to convert Aston Martin's technical potential into championship success. Montoya's guarantee that Aston Martin will have a world champion within 3 years isn't just based on optimism. It's rooted in observable patterns and logical analysis. Even if the 2026 car doesn't immediately deliver championship-winning performance, the combination of Newi's design evolution, Honda's engine development, and Aston Martin's growing capabilities suggests that success is inevitable rather than merely possible. The concept of finding loopholes in new regulations isn't about cheating or circumventing the spirit of the rules. It's about understanding the regulations so thoroughly that you can identify legal interpretations that others miss. When the FIA writes technical regulations, they're trying to achieve specific goals while maintaining competitive balance. But complex rule sets always create opportunities for creative interpretation. Newi's genius lies in visualizing how air flows around and through a race car in ways that others can't match. While most designers rely heavily on computational fluid dynamics and wind tunnel testing, Newi still sketches his initial concepts by hand and has an intuitive understanding of aerodynamic principles. This approach often leads to solutions that wouldn't emerge from conventional design processes. The 2026 regulations are particularly susceptible to creative interpretation because they're introducing so many new concepts simultaneously. Active aerodynamics will require entirely new approaches to managing downforce and drag. The integration of significantly more electrical energy into the powertrain will create new opportunities for performance optimization. The smaller, lighter cars will behave differently in ways that could favor certain design philosophies. If Montoya's prediction proves accurate and Newi does find a significant regulatory loophole, the implications could extend far beyond just winning races. A dominant Aston Martin could reshape the competitive landscape for years to come, potentially establishing new technical directions that other teams would need to follow. The psychological impact on Fernando Alonso would be equally significant. A driver of his caliber, finally given championship-caliber machinery after years of frustration, would likely deliver performances that remind everyone why he's considered one of the all-time greats. The motivation of potentially winning his third world championship at this stage of his career could unlock levels of performance that even surprise his most dedicated fans. As we approach the 2026 season, all eyes will be on whether Montoya's bold prediction materializes. The combination of Adrian Newey's design brilliance, Honda's engineering excellence, Fernando Alonso's driving mastery, and the opportunities created by revolutionary new regulations has created what might be the perfect storm for championship success. Whether it happens in 2026, 2027, or 2028, one thing seems certain: Aston Martin's championship drought is about to end in spectacular fashion. What if I told you that one of Formula One's brightest talents might be planning his escape route from the most prestigious team in motorsport? Picture this: Charles Leclerc, Ferrari's golden boy, sitting in a meeting room with his manager, quietly discussing backup plans while the prancing horse struggles through one of its most disappointing seasons in years. This isn't just speculation anymore. This is becoming a very real possibility, and the drama unfolding at Maranello is about to get a whole lot more intense. The storm began brewing after the Brazilian Grand Prix, where Ferrari's weekend went from bad to catastrophic. Both Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton failed to see the checkered flag, victims of racing incidents that highlighted just how far the team has fallen from its championship aspirations. But what happened next shocked the Formula One paddock to its core. Ferrari Chairman John Elkann stepped forward with a statement that sent ripples through the motorsport world. In a blunt, almost brutal assessment following the Sao Paulo race, Elkann delivered what can only be described as a public dressing down of his own drivers. His message was crystal clear and cutting: focus on driving, talk less. The target wasn't just the underperforming Hamilton, but also Leclerc, Ferrari's homegrown star who many consider one of the strongest performers of the entire season. This wasn't your typical corporate speak or diplomatic criticism. This was raw, unfiltered frustration from the very top of Ferrari's hierarchy, and it landed like a bombshell. Elkann didn't stop there either. He claimed that outside of the engineers and mechanics, the rest simply wasn't up to standard. The implication was unmistakable. The drivers were part of the problem. For context, this criticism came at perhaps the worst possible moment for team morale. Ferrari entered the season with genuine championship hopes after pushing McLaren to the wire in the previous year's constructors' battle. The momentum from that Abu Dhabi showdown was supposed to carry them forward. Instead, that momentum evaporated like morning mist. With just 3 rounds remaining in the season, Ferrari is still chasing their first Grand Prix victory of the campaign. The contrast between expectation and reality couldn't be more stark. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. While Hamilton's struggles this season provide some context for Elkann's frustration, Leclerc's inclusion in this criticism has left many scratching their heads. The Monegasque driver has been nothing short of exceptional, dragging the underperforming Ferrari to 7 podium finishes and establishing a commanding 66-point advantage over his legendary teammate in the Drivers' Championship standings. Ralf Schumacher, the former Formula One driver turned pundit, didn't mince words when analyzing this situation. Speaking through German media, Schumacher suggested that if he were in Leclerc's position, he would be immediately working on what he calls a plan B, not just thinking about it, but actively developing an exit strategy. This isn't casual advice from a former driver. This is a serious recommendation based on years of experience in the cutthroat world of Formula One politics. Schumacher's analysis cuts deep into the heart of Ferrari's current predicament. He believes Elkann's statement was deliberate and serious, influenced by what he describes as internal pressure surrounding the expensive gamble of signing Hamilton. The 7-time world champion was supposed to be the missing piece in Ferrari's championship puzzle. Instead, his arrival has coincided with one of the team's most disappointing campaigns in recent memory. The irony is palpable. Leclerc, who has been carrying Ferrari on his shoulders throughout this difficult season, finds himself caught in the crossfire of management frustration aimed primarily at his struggling teammate. Schumacher questions why Leclerc was even mentioned in Elkann's criticism, suggesting the young driver should be demanding answers about this apparent targeting. What makes this situation even more intriguing is Leclerc's position within the Ferrari family. He's not just another driver. He's been groomed as the face of the franchise, the local hero who was supposed to lead Ferrari back to championship glory. He's established himself in Monaco, getting married soon, and has always seemed like the perfect fit for the Maranello culture. Yet here he finds himself being publicly criticized by the chairman of his dream team. Schumacher's advice is pragmatic and based on hard-earned wisdom from his own racing career. He emphasizes that in situations like this, a driver must protect their own interests. You cannot allow management to walk all over you, regardless of how prestigious the team might be. The recommendation to develop a plan B isn't about disloyalty. It's about self-preservation in a business where careers can change direction overnight. The timing of this internal friction couldn't be worse for Ferrari's championship ambitions, but it might actually be perfect timing for Leclerc's long-term career planning. The current Formula One landscape doesn't offer many obvious alternatives for a driver of his caliber. McLaren has locked down Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris for the long term. Mercedes appears committed to George Russell and young Kimi Antonelli. The Red Bull second seat has become something of a career graveyard for multiple drivers. However, the landscape could shift dramatically with the upcoming regulation changes. The new technical rules for the following season could completely reshape the competitive order, potentially opening doors that currently seem firmly closed. Max Verstappen's performance-related exit clause at Red Bull sent shockwaves through the previous silly season, and if Red Bull struggles with their new engine program, it could create unexpected opportunities. Aston Martin represents another fascinating possibility on the horizon. With Adrian Newey now part of their technical team and a Honda Works engine deal in their arsenal, the Silverstone-based squad is positioning itself as a serious championship contender. Fernando Alonso will turn 45 next year and has hinted that it might be his final season. For a driver like Leclerc, who has never truly been in a title fight despite his obvious talents, Aston Martin could represent the perfect opportunity to finally compete for championships. The situation becomes even more complex when you consider Ferrari's current predicament. They're facing the very real possibility of finishing a season without a single victory for the first time in 4 years. This would represent a catastrophic failure for a team that invests hundreds of millions of dollars annually and carries the weight of Italian national pride on its shoulders. What's particularly troubling about Elkann's public criticism is the timing and manner of delivery. Both Leclerc and Hamilton have been careful in their public comments this season. Their criticisms have been constructive rather than destructive, focusing on team unity rather than finger-pointing. They've handled a difficult situation with professionalism, making Elkann's public rebuke seem even more harsh and unnecessary. The internal pressure at Ferrari is clearly immense. The decision to sign Hamilton was described as one of the most expensive personnel decisions in the team's history. The move was supposed to generate immediate results both on track and in terms of commercial value. While Hamilton's name certainly boosted Ferrari's global profile and share price, the on-track performance hasn't materialized as expected. For Leclerc, this creates a uniquely challenging situation. He's performing at an exceptionally high level, consistently extracting maximum performance from a car that clearly isn't championship caliber. Yet he finds himself being publicly criticized by his own chairman, lumped together with a teammate who is struggling to adapt to the new environment. The question now becomes whether Ferrari recognizes the potential consequences of alienating their star performer. While Leclerc currently has limited options for alternative employment, that situation could change rapidly in the volatile world of Formula One. Teams that seem settled today might have completely different lineups tomorrow, especially with major regulation changes on the horizon. Ferrari must be careful not to create a situation where they push away the very driver who could lead them back to championship success. Leclerc represents the future of the team, a young talent who could potentially deliver titles for the next decade if properly supported and motivated. Alienating him over a frustrating season could prove to be a decision Ferrari regrets for years to come. The message from Schumacher is clear and direct. Leclerc should not accept being treated poorly, regardless of the prestige associated with driving for Ferrari. In Formula One, loyalty is often a one-way street, and drivers must be prepared to protect their own interests when management fails to appreciate their contributions. As this situation continues to develop, all eyes will be on how Ferrari handles the fallout from Elkann's comments, and whether they can rebuild the trust and confidence of their star driver before it's too late. When McLaren's CEO dropped a bombshell about Formula One's golden boy, the entire racing world stopped to listen. Zak Brown just called out Max Verstappen for being too aggressive and arrogant on track, specifically targeting his battles with Lewis Hamilton. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Brown might actually be right, and the evidence is more damning than you think. What we're about to uncover goes beyond typical racing politics. This is about the fine line between championship-winning aggression and dangerous driving that could reshape how we view one of Formula One's greatest talents. By the end of this video, you'll understand why even Verstappen's own former teammate at Red Bull is backing up these explosive claims. Let me set the scene for you. Max Verstappen stands as arguably the most dominant driver of his generation. 4 world championships, countless race victories, and a reputation for wheel-to-wheel combat that leaves opponents questioning their life choices. His driving style has been described as uncompromising, fearless, and at times, downright intimidating. But according to Zak Brown, the man who oversees McLaren's racing operations, there's a darker side to this brilliance. Brown didn't hold back when speaking about Verstappen's approach to racing. He described the Dutch champion as someone who can become a bruiser on track, whose arrogance emerges during intense battles. Now, before you dismiss this as jealousy from a rival team boss, remember that Brown's McLaren drivers are currently fighting Verstappen for championships. He has every reason to stay diplomatic, yet he chose to speak out. The McLaren CEO made it clear he wasn't trying to diminish Verstappen's achievements. 4 world championships don't lie, and Brown acknowledged that many great champions throughout Formula One history have displayed similar traits. The difference, according to Brown, is that Verstappen has crossed lines that others haven't. When pressed for specific examples, Brown pointed directly to Verstappen's battles with Lewis Hamilton, particularly their encounters in Brazil. These weren't just racing incidents. They were moments where competitive spirit allegedly transformed into something more dangerous. The 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix stands out as a perfect example, where both drivers ended up in the runoff area after an aggressive move that many observers felt went beyond acceptable racing standards. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Adrian Newey, the legendary Formula One designer who worked closely with Verstappen at Red Bull during his championship-winning seasons, has essentially confirmed Brown's assessment. Newey revealed that Verstappen showed signs of cracking under pressure during the intense 2021 championship battle, particularly after the controversial Silverstone incident with Hamilton. According to Newey, the pressure of being hunted rather than the hunter affected Verstappen's judgment. The Dutch driver went from being a comfortable championship leader to feeling genuine pressure for the first time in his career. Mercedes found significant pace improvements late in the season, and suddenly, Verstappen wasn't cruising to the title anymore. This pressure manifested in increasingly aggressive driving that even Newey admitted probably deserved penalties. The Silverstone crash created a turning point in Verstappen's approach. Newey described how Verstappen developed very strong feelings about that incident, viewing it as an attack on his championship hopes. When you're knocked out of a race while leading the championship, it changes your mindset. The psychological impact carried forward to subsequent races, influencing decisions that might have been different under normal circumstances. What makes this analysis particularly compelling is the source. Newey wasn't speaking as a rival trying to score points. He was part of the Red Bull team that benefited from Verstappen's aggressive approach. His willingness to acknowledge that his own driver probably went too far carries significant weight in this debate. The Brazil 2021 incident that Brown referenced wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a pattern of increasingly desperate moves as the championship battle intensified. Verstappen's defensive maneuvers became more extreme, his overtaking attempts more borderline. The line between hard racing and dangerous driving became increasingly blurred. This raises fascinating questions about the psychology of championship pressure. Throughout motorsport history, we've seen how the biggest stages can bring out both the best and worst in competitors. Ayrton Senna's controversial moves in championship-deciding races, Michael Schumacher's questionable tactics in title fights, great champions often push boundaries when everything is on the line. But modern Formula One operates under different safety standards and expectations. What might have been acceptable in previous eras faces greater scrutiny today. The sport has evolved, and with it, the understanding of what constitutes fair competition versus dangerous driving. Verstappen's supporters argue that his aggressive approach is simply the mark of a true racer who refuses to give an inch. They point to his incredible car control and split-second decision-making as evidence that his moves, while aggressive, are calculated rather than reckless. The counterargument suggests that calculation doesn't excuse moves that put other drivers at unnecessary risk. The Lewis-Hamilton factor adds another layer to this story. Hamilton, as a 7-time world champion and one of the sport's most experienced drivers, isn't easily intimidated. If Brown is suggesting that even Hamilton has been on the receiving end of overly aggressive moves, it speaks to a pattern of behavior rather than isolated incidents. What's particularly noteworthy is how this controversy reflects broader tensions within Formula One's competitive landscape. Team principals rarely call out rival drivers so directly, preferring to handle disputes through official channels or subtle diplomatic language. Brown's willingness to speak openly suggests either supreme confidence in his position or genuine concern about racing standards. The timing of these comments also matters. With championship battles potentially involving multiple drivers and teams, establishing clear boundaries for acceptable racing becomes crucial. If Verstappen's approach has indeed crossed lines in the past, addressing it now could influence how future battles unfold. Looking at the broader implications, this controversy touches on fundamental questions about Formula One's identity. Is the sport better served by allowing maximum aggression between competitors, or should there be clearer limits to ensure safety and fairness? Different fans will have different opinions, but the debate itself highlights how much these issues matter to the sport's integrity. The evidence supporting Brown's claims extends beyond single incidents. Multiple observers, including those within Verstappen's own team, have acknowledged moments where aggression potentially exceeded acceptable limits. This isn't about perfect drivers making occasional mistakes. It's about a pattern of decision-making under extreme pressure. For Verstappen, these criticisms represent both a challenge and an opportunity. Great champions often face moments where they must evolve their approach while maintaining their competitive edge. The question becomes whether he can retain his aggressive effectiveness while operating within boundaries that other competitors and observers consider acceptable. The broader Formula One community will be watching how this plays out. If multiple respected voices within the sport are raising similar concerns, it suggests issues that extend beyond typical rival team politics. The sport's governing bodies, fellow drivers and fans all have stakes in ensuring that competitive intensity doesn't compromise safety or fairness. This controversy ultimately reflects Formula One's ongoing evolution as both a sport and entertainment spectacle. Balancing authentic competition with responsible conduct remains one of the sport's greatest challenges, and high-profile incidents like those between Verstappen and Hamilton serve as crucial test cases for where those boundaries should be drawn. What do you think about Zak Brown's explosive claims? Are we witnessing legitimate criticism of dangerous driving, or just rival team politics in action? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into Formula One's biggest controversies. Hold up! Did Formula One just witness one of the most brutal takedowns in recent memory? Because Jacques Villeneuve just absolutely demolished Franco Colapinto with words that are going to sting for years to come. The 1997 world champion didn't just criticize the Alpine driver, he completely tore apart his entire career with one devastating phrase that's got the F1 world talking. What happened here goes way beyond your typical paddock drama. This is a former world champion questioning the very foundation of how modern Formula One operates. And frankly, it's about time someone said what everyone's been thinking. But before we dive into this explosive controversy, let's understand exactly what led to this moment and why Villeneuve's comments are sending shockwaves through the sport. Alpine recently confirmed their driver lineup for the 2026 season, keeping Franco Colapinto alongside Pierre Gasly. On paper, it seems like a reasonable decision for a team looking for stability during massive regulatory changes. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find a story that reveals everything wrong with modern Formula One's approach to talent development. Here's where things get interesting. Colapinto took over the Alpine seat from Jack Doohan earlier this season, and the results have been, let's be honest, disappointing. Since stepping into that blue and pink machine at Imola, the Argentine driver hasn't managed to score a single championship point. Not one. For a team that's already struggling at the bottom of the constructor standings, this kind of performance typically doesn't earn you a contract extension. But Colapinto got one anyway, and that's exactly what triggered Villeneuve's explosive response. The Canadian legend didn't mince words when he spoke to a gambling platform about Alpine's decision. His assessment was brutal and direct. He compared the current situation to the dark days of Formula One, when teams were forced to hire drivers based purely on the financial backing they could bring, rather than their talent behind the wheel. Think about that for a moment. A world champion is essentially saying that one of the most prestigious seats in motorsport has been handed out based on money rather than merit. That's a serious accusation that cuts to the heart of what Formula One should represent. Villeneuve went even further, stating that nothing Colapinto has shown on track could justify keeping him for another season. He acknowledged that the young driver has displayed flashes of speed, but emphasized that these moments have been far too inconsistent to warrant the faith Alpine has placed in him. This criticism becomes even more pointed when you consider the alternative options that were available to Alpine. Leonardo Fornaroli, who's currently leading the Formula 2 championship, represents exactly the kind of talent that traditionally earns promotion to Formula One. The Italian driver is on track to achieve something truly special, winning both Formula 3 and Formula 2 titles in consecutive seasons. That's the same path taken by current F1 stars like Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and Charles Leclerc. It's a proven formula for identifying genuine talent, yet Alpine chose to overlook Fornaroli entirely. David Valsecchi, a former racer turned analyst, expressed his bewilderment at Alpine's decision. He painted a picture of Fornaroli as the ideal candidate, a driver who doesn't crash, causes minimal damage, makes few mistakes, performs well in qualifying, wins races, and doesn't complain. These are exactly the qualities teams claim to value, yet Fornaroli will likely miss out on a Formula One opportunity entirely. The contrast is striking. While Fornaroli has been dominating Formula 2, demonstrating the kind of consistent excellence that should guarantee a path to F1, Colapinto has struggled to extract performance from his Alpine machinery. The numbers don't lie, and they paint a picture that supports Villeneuve's harsh assessment. But here's where the story gets more complex. Alpine is facing an unprecedented level of change heading into 2026. New chassis regulations, completely different aerodynamics, and a switch from being a Renault factory team to becoming a Mercedes customer operation. In this context, keeping familiar drivers might seem like the sensible approach. The team's management argues that having drivers who understand the organization's processes and culture provides valuable stability during a period of massive transformation. They point to Colapinto's progress in getting closer to Pierre Gasly's pace as evidence of improvement that deserves to be rewarded. Yet this argument falls apart when you consider the broader implications for Formula One's credibility as a meritocracy. If consistent underperformance can be rewarded with contract extensions, while genuine talent in the feeder series gets ignored, what message does that send about the sport's commitment to finding the best drivers in the world? The timing of Villeneuve's comments is particularly significant. Formula One has been grappling with questions about accessibility and fairness for years. The sport has made efforts to improve diversity and create more pathways for talent from different backgrounds. Yet decisions like Alpine's seem to undermine these initiatives. What makes this situation even more frustrating is that Alpine has other options within their own system. Paul Aron has been impressive in their reserve role, representing another talented young driver who could benefit from an opportunity. Instead, the team has chosen to stick with a driver whose performance suggests he may not be ready for Formula One's demands. The broader question this raises is whether Formula One teams are making decisions based on sporting merit or financial considerations. While Villeneuve stopped short of explicitly detailing the financial aspects of Colapinto's deal, his comments strongly suggest that money played a significant role in Alpine's decision-making process. This isn't just about one driver or one team. It's about the direction Formula One is heading, and whether the sport can maintain its position as the pinnacle of motorsport if talent takes a backseat to financial backing. Every decision like Alpine's makes it harder for genuinely gifted drivers to break through, potentially robbing fans of seeing the absolute best competition possible. The pressure is now entirely on Colapinto to prove Villeneuve wrong. The Argentine driver has been handed another opportunity that many believe he hasn't earned, and the spotlight will be intensely focused on his performance throughout 2026. If he fails to deliver, it will only reinforce the criticism and make Alpine's decision look even more questionable. For Alpine, this represents a massive gamble. They're betting that Colapinto can find the consistency and pace that has eluded him so far. If that bet pays off, they'll look like visionaries who saw potential others missed. If it doesn't, they'll face serious questions about their decision-making process and commitment to excellence. The stakes couldn't be higher. Formula One's reputation as the ultimate test of driving skill hangs in the balance every time teams prioritize factors other than pure talent. Villeneuve's brutal assessment serves as a wake-up call for the sport to remember what truly matters. So what happens next? Only time will tell whether Colapinto can silence his critics and justify Alpine's faith. But one thing is certain, the pressure is on, the spotlight is bright, and the Formula One world will be watching every lap to see if merit or money ultimately prevails in this fascinating and controversial story. What if I told you that being your own worst critic could actually be your greatest weapon in Formula One? Stick around because we're about to dive deep into Lando Norris's hidden psychological advantage that's propelling him toward his first world championship, and why former world champion Jenson Button thinks this mental trait is absolutely game-changing. Right now, as we speak, Lando Norris sits at the top of the Formula One championship standings with just 3 races left in the season. He's holding a crucial 24-point lead over his teammate Oscar Piastri, and the racing world is watching every move he makes. But here's what's fascinating. While most drivers would be playing it safe and avoiding any negative talk, Norris continues to do something that would make most sports psychologists cringe. He constantly criticizes his own performance, calls out his own mistakes, and publicly questions whether he's done enough. And according to Jenson Button, this isn't a weakness, it's actually his secret superpower. Now I know what you're thinking. How can being negative about yourself possibly be an advantage in one of the most mentally demanding sports on the planet? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today, because the psychology behind championship-level racing is way more complex than most people realize. Let's start with what we're actually seeing from Norris this season. The McLaren driver has pulled off something remarkable. He's completely turned around what looked like a hopeless championship situation. Earlier in the season, he was trailing his teammate Piastri by 34 points. That's more than a full race win's worth of points to make up. Most drivers would have thrown in the towel mentally at that point, but Norris did something different. He kept pushing, kept improving, and kept being brutally honest about his own shortcomings. Button, who won his own world championship back in 2009, has been watching this transformation closely. And what he's identified is something that goes against conventional wisdom in sports psychology. Usually, we're told to be positive, to focus on strengths, to avoid dwelling on mistakes. But Button sees Norris's self-criticism as something entirely different, a form of advanced self-awareness that actually accelerates improvement. Here's the thing about self-criticism that most people don't understand. There's a massive difference between destructive self-doubt and constructive self-analysis. Destructive self-doubt tears you down and makes you question your abilities. But constructive self-analysis, which is what Norris practices, allows you to identify problems quickly and fix them before they become bigger issues. Think about it this way. In Formula One, margins are incredibly thin. We're talking about thousandths of a second making the difference between pole position and starting fifth on the grid. In that environment, being able to honestly assess your own performance isn't just helpful, it's essential. While other drivers might make excuses or point fingers at their team, their car setup, or track conditions, Norris consistently looks in the mirror first. But Button makes an important distinction here. He notes that while self-criticism can be a strength, you have to be careful about how much of it you show to your competitors. This is where the psychological warfare aspect of Formula One comes into play. If your rivals think you're mentally weak or struggling with confidence, they'll try to exploit that. They'll push harder when they're racing wheel-to-wheel with you, assuming you might back down under pressure. However, Norris seems to have found the perfect balance. He's self-critical enough to drive continuous improvement, but he's not letting it affect his on-track confidence or his ability to make bold moves when he needs to. This is incredibly difficult to achieve, and it's why Button calls it a superpower. Let's look at some specific examples of how this plays out. After qualifying sessions, while other drivers might make excuses about traffic or track conditions, Norris will often say his lap wasn't good enough, even when he's starting near the front of the grid. This might seem like false modesty, but it's actually something much more sophisticated. He's identifying areas for improvement that others might overlook. The psychological benefits of this approach are enormous. First, it prevents complacency. When you're constantly looking for ways to improve, you never stop pushing. Second, it builds genuine confidence. When you know you've honestly assessed your performance and identified specific areas to work on, you approach the next session with a clear plan rather than vague hopes. Third, and this is crucial, it builds trust with your team. Engineers and mechanics can work with a driver who's honest about his mistakes. They can't work effectively with someone who's always making excuses or refusing to acknowledge problems. When Norris tells his team exactly where he felt the car wasn't working or where he made an error, it gives them concrete data to work with. But there's another layer to this that's even more interesting. Button points out that Norris's self-criticism demonstrates emotional maturity. In a sport where ego often runs rampant, being able to put your ego aside and focus purely on performance is rare. It shows that Norris has developed the mental tools to handle the pressure of a championship fight. This becomes even more impressive when you consider the external pressures he's facing. Formula One drivers deal with intense media scrutiny, fan expectations, and the knowledge that millions of people are watching their every move. In that environment, admitting mistakes publicly takes real courage. It would be much easier to deflect or make excuses, but Norris chooses the harder path because he knows it makes him better. The timing of this psychological approach is also crucial. We're seeing Norris employ this strategy just as he's mounted his championship challenge. It's not coincidence, it's cause and effect. His willingness to be self-critical has accelerated his development at exactly the moment when his car became capable of winning races and championships. Looking at his recent performances, the results speak for themselves. Button notes that Norris's driving has been genuinely impressive, backing up the mathematical advantage he's built in the championship standings. This isn't a driver who's stumbling into a title through luck or superior equipment. This is someone who's elevated his game through mental discipline and honest self-assessment. What makes this even more remarkable is how Norris has maintained this approach while dealing with the unique pressures of fighting his own teammate for the championship. Internal team battles can destroy driver relationships and create toxic environments, but Norris and Piastri have managed to keep things professional and respectful. Part of this is likely due to Norris's mature approach to self-criticism. When you're focused on your own improvement rather than making excuses, it's harder to blame others for your problems. The broader implications of this go beyond just Formula One. In any high-performance environment, the ability to honestly assess your own performance while maintaining confidence is incredibly valuable. Most people struggle with one side of this equation or the other. They're either too self-critical and it destroys their confidence, or they're too defensive and they stop improving. Button's analysis suggests that Norris has cracked this code. He's found a way to be brutally honest with himself while maintaining the confidence needed to make split-second decisions at 200 miles per hour. That's not just impressive, it's almost unprecedented at this level of motorsport. As we head into the final 3 races of the championship, this psychological advantage could prove decisive. While other drivers might feel the pressure mounting and start making mistakes, Norris's approach suggests he'll continue analyzing, improving, and adapting. He's built a mental framework that actually gets stronger under pressure rather than weaker. So the next time you see Lando Norris being critical of his own performance in an interview, remember what you're really witnessing. You're seeing a masterclass in high-performance psychology. You're watching someone who's turned what most people would consider a weakness into his greatest strength. And according to a world champion who knows what it takes to win at the highest level, that self-awareness and mental discipline might just be the secret ingredient that delivers Norris his first Formula One World Championship title. The 2025 Formula One season is approaching its climactic finale, and what we're witnessing might be one of the most dramatic championship battles in recent memory. But here's what nobody expected. Red Bull's team principal Laurent Mekies just made a shocking confession that could change everything we think we know about Max Verstappen's title chances. Picture this scenario. You're Max Verstappen, sitting 49 points behind championship leader Lando Norris with only 3 races remaining. The pressure is mounting, the stakes couldn't be higher, and your team boss just admitted publicly that Red Bull has been completely wrong about predicting their car's performance all season long. This isn't just any admission. This is a revelation that exposes the uncertainty plaguing one of Formula One's most successful teams at the worst possible moment. Let me take you inside what's really happening behind the scenes at Red Bull Racing as they prepare for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, the first race of this season-ending triple header that will determine who becomes the 2025 World Champion. Since Formula One returned from the summer break, Verstappen has been absolutely electric on track. His recent performances have been nothing short of spectacular, securing podium finishes at every single race during this crucial period. The Dutch driver has claimed victories at 3 major circuits: Italy's legendary Monza, the challenging streets of Baku in Azerbaijan, and the high-speed circuit of the Americas in Texas. This remarkable run of form has single-handedly kept his championship hopes alive, when many had written him off completely. But here's where things get really interesting. Despite this incredible streak of success, Red Bull's leadership is displaying an unusual level of uncertainty about their car's capabilities. Laurent Mekies, speaking with refreshing honesty to the media, revealed something that should send shockwaves through the Formula One paddock. When asked about Red Bull's chances of performing well at the unique Las Vegas Strip circuit, Mekies made an admission that caught everyone off guard. He confessed that Red Bull has been consistently incorrect when trying to predict which circuits would favor their car throughout this entire season. Think about the implications of this statement for a moment. This is a team that has dominated Formula One for years, winning multiple championships and establishing themselves as the benchmark for technical excellence. Yet their own team principal is admitting they've been flying blind when it comes to understanding their own machine's strengths and weaknesses. Mekies elaborated on this stunning revelation by providing specific examples that highlight just how unpredictable their season has been. He mentioned that Red Bull didn't expect to perform well at Monza, the temple of speed in Italy where aerodynamic efficiency is crucial. They were equally pessimistic about their chances at Baku's demanding street circuit, with its unique combination of long straights and tight corners. Singapore's Marina Bay Circuit, known for its punishing heat and technical layout, was another venue where they anticipated struggling. Yet despite these low expectations, Verstappen managed to excel at each of these challenging venues. This pattern reveals something fascinating about Red Bull's current situation. They're succeeding in spite of their own predictions, not because of them. The team principal's response to questions about Las Vegas was equally revealing. When pressed about whether the unique characteristics of the Las Vegas Strip circuit might make it more difficult for Red Bull to find their car's optimal performance window, Mekis refused to blame the track itself. Instead, he emphasized that achieving peak performance is incredibly difficult at every single race, regardless of the venue's specific challenges. Las Vegas presents its own set of unique obstacles that could prove decisive in this championship fight. The circuit demands a low downforce setup to maximize straight-line speed, while the chilly Nevada desert conditions create additional variables that teams must navigate carefully. These factors could either play into Red Bull's hands or create new complications for their already unpredictable package. What makes this situation even more compelling is Verstappen's own perspective on the championship battle. When asked about his thoughts on the upcoming triple header, the three-time world champion displayed the same uncertainty that his team principal had expressed. He acknowledged that the remaining circuits are vastly different from each other, making it nearly impossible to predict where Red Bull will be competitive. Verstappen's analysis of his team's struggles this season was particularly insightful. He pinpointed tire performance as a persistent weakness that continues to plague Red Bull's efforts. The ability to get their tires working optimally within the correct temperature window has been inconsistent, creating a performance lottery that could determine the outcome of individual races. The numbers tell a sobering story for Verstappen's championship ambitions. With 49 points separating him from Norris and only 83 points remaining across the final 3 races, every session becomes crucial. A single mechanical failure, strategic mistake, or performance deficit could effectively end his hopes of securing a 5th consecutive world championship. Perhaps most tellingly, Verstappen himself acknowledged that the championship wasn't lost in recent races, but rather through a series of disappointing performances that stretched from the season opener all the way to the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. This honest assessment reveals that Red Bull's current form, while impressive, represents damage control rather than the dominant pace they've enjoyed in previous seasons. The psychological aspect of this championship fight cannot be understated. Norris has the luxury of knowing that consistent points finishes will likely secure him the title, while Verstappen must take risks and potentially make aggressive moves to close the gap. This dynamic creates a fascinating strategic chess match, where both drivers must balance championship mathematics with on-track performance. What makes Red Bull's admission so significant is the timing. In previous years, their technical team's ability to predict and optimize their car's performance gave them a crucial strategic advantage. Now, as they enter the most critical phase of the season, they're essentially admitting they're operating without that traditional edge. The Las Vegas Grand Prix takes on added significance when we consider that Verstappen won the inaugural race at this venue in 2023. That victory demonstrated his ability to adapt quickly to new circuits and extract maximum performance from his car, even in unfamiliar conditions. However, the 2025 season has shown that past performance doesn't guarantee future success in Formula One's ever-evolving landscape. Team dynamics within Red Bull also add another layer of intrigue to this championship battle. The pressure on engineers, strategists, and mechanics to deliver flawless execution over the next 3 races is immense. Any small mistake could prove costly, and the knowledge that their own predictions have been unreliable all season certainly doesn't reduce that pressure. Looking ahead to the final races, the championship fight will likely come down to which team can better manage the unexpected. Red Bull's admission of uncertainty might actually work in their favor by forcing them to prepare more thoroughly for various scenarios rather than relying on potentially flawed predictions. The Las Vegas Grand Prix represents more than just another race. It's the opening act of a championship finale that could define careers and reshape the competitive landscape of Formula One. With Red Bull's honest assessment of their limitations now public, the stage is set for a thrilling conclusion to what has already been an unpredictable season. As the lights go out in Las Vegas, one thing is certain. We're about to witness whether raw talent and determination can overcome mathematical disadvantage and technical uncertainty in Formula One's ultimate test of championship mettle.